Hello, 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 and welcome to That Quirky Bird Girl podcast. I am Steph, your host, and today I'll be talking about a few things that I'm gonna lean into the concept of this podcast episode. So what we'll be talking about today is authenticity and spontaneity. And I am someone who has always struggled with spontaneity. I am very much a planner. I have planned my whole life, and there was definitely a point in time when I hit a wall with that, and I was no longer able to plan. I was no longer able to keep the same systems that were keeping me afloat. And I had a little bit of a moment of panic with my past experiences. And I just have learned so much over the past year. And I feel so strong and I feel empowered. That being said, it's also been a difficult journey for me. And I have been so lucky enough to have amazing people in my life that have guided me through my journey. And in addition to those people, I've also had our birds. And so in my past podcast episodes, I've talked a little bit about how birds really helped pull me out of times that were admittedly the most difficult periods of my life. I talked about how I had spent some time running from the birds and not wanting to engage with birds as much or even at all. And going through that and not knowing what my next steps were, or not knowing what to plan or where to plan or how to do it, I really struggled. And I certainly can acknowledge now that if I came back to the birds sooner, maybe this would have been a little bit more easy for me, or I would have been better able to continue going on the trajectory that I was already on. I'm someone who is a strong and fierce fighter. I have my whole life been someone who cares and loves so deeply. And with that, you can find a side of the world that is not necessarily looking out for your best interests. And I have a scenario I'd like to talk about that actually happened to me recently that definitely took advantage of that vulnerability and that care that I have, and I am so proud of. Part of the reason why I am so passionate about birds is because they were my formative experience. They were my first experience with language. In fact, I actually learned language and language reproduction through English. As a kid, up until the age of 6, I was phenomenal at echolalia. If you're not familiar with echolalia, basically what that is and what it was for me is the reproduction of particular phrases and words and just kind of reproducing those over and over and over again. Now, if you have someone in your life who is autistic, you are familiar with echolalia and what that is. You'll often hear that with kids where they're saying, the same word. For me, I would say touchdown over and over again. So it'd be like touchdown, 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 touchdown. Someone asked me a question and I would say touchdown. Another phrase that I would say was this book that I was constantly read as a kid, which was I so mad. And I would say it over and over and over again to no sense. Someone would ask me a question, I would say, I so mad, I so mad, I so mad. I was also the why kid, basically my whole entire childhood. Why? That stage did not stop for me, to my parents' dismay, let's say. And so I was repeating phrases, but that was not language. It wasn't communication. I wasn't able to communicate until I was much older. So you ask, what did I do instead? Instead, if you have seen the Queen's Gambit, then you can recall the scene where she's sort of looking up and you can see the chess pieces moving along. I have that same processing ability. However, in my case, it is slightly different. So I'm able to paint pictures of words, of sentences in my mind that help me understand and add context to whatever it is that I am seeing in front of me. So when I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm seeing a variety of different colors and I'm seeing them flow through. And this allows me to process information, sometimes slower, sometimes quicker. It also allows me to be able to take in the full context of the situation. So often I'm able to understand someone's body language or understand the message they're trying to communicate before they may even be able to understand why it is they're communicating or why it is that they're saying the words that they are. So in my adult life, this skill has certainly absolutely helped me so much. As a kid, it was hard though. There wasn't anyone that related to this like visual that I would create in my mind, and I also wasn't able to communicate necessarily what it was that I was experiencing. Now, where do birds come in with this? So birds actually developed that system of color for me. So as a kid, I had an encyclopedia of birds and a few other animals that lived in Australia. I was a Steve Irwin fan. I loved him so much. I love him to this day. I think the mission that his kids are carrying out is so beautiful and it's an emblem of the story that he carried and the weight that he meant to me as a child. I mean, he truly was. I have a father. He was my father. He was a father figure for me. And seeing him and seeing his passion, seeing his love, that wasn't something that I was necessarily exposed to. So growing alongside of that, and then after his passing, it was a really hard time for me as a kid. And at the same time, my parents going through a divorce was hard as well. And so there was just a lot going on during that period. However, that's me jumping ahead. So if I'm getting back to the 6-year-old version of me that didn't speak any tangible language and only saw visuals that were formed from this encyclopedia of birds and Australian animals, I was able to use those colors to convey my emotions. So when I was feeling something, when someone else was feeling something, when I was creating a sentence, when I was creating an experience in my mind, I would be painting a picture. Using the colors of the birds really helped me to be able to do that. When I turned 6, I started, of course, as many 6-year-olds do, I got enrolled in school. And from that point, it was very difficult. My relationship with English began to form. And I will say that it was not a positive relationship with English. It was a language that was forced upon me. I felt like I knew that the way that I communicated was off or off-putting. I knew that my repeated sentences or my repeated phrases were no longer okay, and I was actually getting in trouble for them in school because they didn't make sense or they didn't add up to anything. And that was really hard. So I really had to take on this new relationship with English, take on this whole new language and try to make sense of it and stumble so much. So from 6 to literally 8 up until I got into 2nd grade, that was the first experience that I had with a teacher who was empathetic towards what I was going through, because I still wasn't really able to communicate. And I would sit in art class and I would draw these beautiful images of what it was that I was seeing and what it was that I was experiencing, but I wasn't able to convey it. And an art teacher once was like, "This is so beautiful. This is just a mix of colors." And everyone else had stick figures and they had houses and they had all of these things that they had painted out. And those were equally as beautiful. But I didn't think that. I didn't think mine was beautiful. I, from 6 onward, thought there was something wrong with it. I knew that I was different. And I knew that the way that I communicated, there was something that was wrong with it. There was something that my teachers, something that my parents, something that whoever it was that I was in front of just didn't want it. And so my relationship with English really started with, how well can I adapt? How well can I force myself into speaking this language? And, it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't safe. I felt like I was always in the negative and asking for more. And I still feel that to this day in speaking English. English is a really hard language for me. And that might sound strange because English was my first language. It's the first experience that I had. But the way that it was placed upon me in such a, you can't have it your way, you need to have it our way, that was really, really difficult. And it felt like everyone was telling me my bond that I had with birds, the bond that I had with nature, the bond that I had with Steve Irwin, all of these things that they had created for me to be able to communicate. No one cared. And they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear the why. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to see my different worldview. I was completely alone. And the only thing that I had to do was to adapt to whatever they were wanting me to do instead. And so I did that. I did that practically for my whole life. Adapting to what other people demanded of me and what they needed of me became easy. It was like I was moving through quicksand and constantly getting my feet up above on the ground. And then, there's this new rule or this new communication or this new something that I had to adapt to find myself in this world that didn't make sense to me, which was English. Like I had a very poor relationship with it, and that hasn't gone away. Recognizing that as I got older and how much anxiety I genuinely felt when I was speaking English was so hard, because I looked around and no one related to me. I grew up in Michigan. Most people in the area that I grew up with, they spoke one language. And so that language was often English, and there wasn't community for me to go to or to run to or to feel less scared and in English. And so when I had the opportunity to travel abroad and raise money for me to live in Europe, I did just that. I went around, I collected bottles, 5 to 10 cents, and I did that until I hit a very high number. And I knew that if I could just learn another language, that my experience would be reshaped and it would be better. I knew that liking birds and loving birds, it would make me feel different and almost too different. And I already felt too different. And if I went back to birds at that time, it felt like I would be pushed out of everywhere. And I couldn't handle that. So I had to do what I knew was best, which was reframe my experience around language by learning a new language. So I raised this money. I moved to Italy at 16. I went to a linguistics school. It was an amazing, amazing experience, and I loved it so, so, so much. I would love to go back at some point. I haven't been back since 2019. From that point, I started a new relationship with language, and I told myself, okay, this time it's going to be a choice. This time it's mine, and it can look exactly how I want it to. I get to decide how much I want to learn of colloquial Italian. I get to decide how much I want to learn of formal Italian. I get to decide how I communicate myself, what verbs I use, what pronouns I use. All of these things contextualized my experience within language and allowed me to actually choose communication in a way that I was not able to do growing up, because my method of communication was literally forcing me outside of becoming this child I was nonverbal. I couldn't speak outside of echolalia. And then being much older and being able to take that decision and say like, no, I'm reclaiming my experience. I'm taking it back for myself. And I'm saying that this is mine and I get to hold it and I get to keep it. And no one can tell me the way that I'm communicating is wrong. And particularly because it's my second language. It's not my first language. I can have the freedom to be able to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes and make changes and adjust and grow within my own language repertoire, let's say. And being able to do that really, really reshaped my experience. So I was able to go through all of that with Italian. And once I started learning Spanish, which was in the same school, and then I came back to the United States, I started going to college and I started studying Spanish. I was so, so dedicated with, okay, so English was my first one, and that one was really difficult, and I don't have a good experience with it. Then I go to Italian. This one's my chosen one. It was a bumpy one, right? It was difficult for me to find my footing and learn something that was completely new, completely different from what I had already experienced, and it was scary. At the same time, though, that was my second time. It was only my second try, and now I get a third try. I get to try with Spanish, and I'm sorry, there are like 20 different dialects. So not only do I get to try with Spanish, but I get to try with Argentine Spanish. I get to try with Colombian Spanish. I get to try with Mexican Spanish. I get to try again, over and over and over, and not give up. And Spanish was really the language that helped me recontextualize all of this. Once I started learning Spanish, I recognized and started feeling so much love in the language. And it's not necessarily because of experiences that I had. I mean, of course, like the friendships that I built and the love that were within those friendships really helped shape my relationship with the language. But that was the first time that I had acknowledged my own skill and the fact that I was a smart kid, and I could just be a smart kid and allow my brain to roam free and try all of these different scenarios and situations that did ultimately scare me and cause me to second guess myself and cause me to think that I didn't deserve to be where I was in that language or in those classes. Like I would be in 400 level classes and be telling myself that I didn't deserve to be there because I I honestly, I'm still exploring why I told myself and why I tell myself. I tell my followers all the time, on my lives, which if you don't follow them, I'm on Twitch and on TikTok, so be sure to check out my lives. They're every night at 9 p.m. EST, but basically not every night at 9 p.m. EST. I have a schedule posted up on Twitch, so you can go ahead and check it out if you're curious, but most of them are at 9 p.m. EST, and then I'll just go live randomly just for fun. But I really struggled with my ability to take up space and to say that I deserve to be here just simply because I care so much about being here. And, there have been so many times in my life where I've been in spaces and I've been like, I don't belong here. And I think that's also what's made me and driven me to be such a strong community builder, and that like, I don't want to leave anyone behind. There is space literally for everyone. This world is so, so, so big. And we all have such a unique voice that is essential in building something that can change the world and building something that can alter our realities and the reality of other people. I've gotten so many email submissions from followers that have told me how my content has shaped their experience over the past few months or over the past however long. And that has been admittedly difficult. Admittedly, it's felt very vulnerable. And I'm very honored to be able to have a platform now that I can come on here and I can talk about birds and I can share my love for birds, because honestly, like, I have had this wild journey of everything started with the birds, and then this middle period of nothing worked for me. I needed to leave the birds behind because I was too weird or too quirky or too this or too that. And then I have this period of, okay, I'm reclaiming my language. I'm taking it back and no one can take it away from me anymore. I get to decide what it looks like. I get to decide what accent I want. I get to decide all of these beautiful things that are completely and entirely up to my own individual experience. And then in my adult life, so I have this beautiful, wonderful experience with Spanish. I love the language so much. I've fallen more and more in love with it every single day, every single time that I speak it. And that relationship, and if you're watching the video right now, you could probably feel the smile on my face. You can see the smile on my face. It has been so, so formative in building my relationship back up with birds again, because now I know that I have this strong ability and desire to communicate in a way that works for me. And I'm able to actually do it in Spanish. And that it's not just limited to Spanish. So I say, I'm able to do it in Spanish, but those lessons I'm able to relay over into Italian, and I'm able to relay them over into English. And it gives me the confidence to be able to talk about birds and to be able to be in spaces where I look around the room and I'm like, wow, these people are so amazing. What did I do to get me here? What did I contribute to be so amazing to just allow their love and their kindness and their care to enrich me and to continue growing a platform that I care so, so deeply about? So how does all of this, how does it bring me back to the birds? So you have the language. I've restored now my ability to communicate in Spanish primarily. However, I can also do that in Italian and in English. Okay, so now I'm able to communicate. I trust my ability to communicate, and I feel stronger and more confident. The next piece is actually taking those lessons and being able to talk about birds and share my bird passion and my bird love in a way that works for me. So birds, when I did start coming back to them, it was after COVID, when I was having a really, really hard time and wrestling with the fact that I was now this graduate or undergraduate graduate, and I had performed so highly in school. I blew myself away. And now what am I going to do? Because going into politics wasn't an option. Going into finance wasn't an option. Going into academia wasn't an option. And mind you, all of these things I would be great at. I would be great in politics, and I would be great in finance, and I would do the impactful work, and I would be able to move people, and I would be able to inspire change. And I think all of that is so beautiful and so important. However, in those fields, you do have to, there's a piece that I have to acknowledge, like, you have to show up completely different. There is a certain level of masking or of putting on some facade that you have to carry with yourself if you are to be in political science, if you are to be in law or finance. And I tried it. I genuinely tried it. And it didn't feel like me. And anytime I'm pulled away from who I am and from the love that I feel and the excitement that I feel and the care, it's not authentic to myself. And I start feeling this intense misalignment that I can't withstand. I don't like feeling inauthentic, and I don't like showing up differently than I know who I am, or I know I am. So I recognized after working at a market research firm and after working in the finance industry that, okay, so it's post-COVID, and I am recognizing that I just can't, I need to be me in a way that works for me. And that's always been my story. You go all the way back, and I needed to be me. The ways and the spaces where I've thrived the most and felt the most love and felt the most embraced are the same spaces where I have been the most authentic version of myself. And I found so much of that at home here, creating content for you all, talking about my podcast, talking about TikTok content, and sharing with you all my story. And I felt like this piece is so fundamental in understanding what I am trying to build, because I've been a part of so many communities where I have been told that the way that I show up is wrong. And I have been told that the way that I show up must be different because it is inappropriate, or it is not how, and I say inappropriate, but what I mean more than anything is it's just different. I just simply was too different for some people to handle. And I've learned it doesn't have anything to do with me. It has nothing to do with my abilities. It has nothing to do with how kind I am, or how much I show up, or how much love, or how much whatever it might be that I pour into that dynamic. It literally wouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, if I'm too different for some people, then they're never going to accept me, and I'll never be able to be my authentic self. It doesn't matter how much I try to convince them of my worth, they won't see it. And it's not worth it anymore for me to sit and try to convince people of my worth when, like I said, like it's not worth to them. And finding the people that I am worth to, has been such an amazing and beautiful journey. I found it on social media. I have found it in some of my best friends. I have found it in family that I love so, so deeply. I mean, you get me talking about the people that have been moderating and following and joining my lives and my family, and you get me talking about my best friends, and I feel so much intense love because those things, and alongside birds, literally those people saved me. And as much as I get email submissions and as much as I get information from you all about how I saved you or my content helped you in some way or another, I can't even begin to describe how much being in this space and being on this platform has saved me. I don't think that I would have been able to get through the experiences that I've gone through over the past year without those people in my life and without this platform. So I'm here because of the birds, but I'm also here because of me. I'm here because there were spaces where I couldn't be my authentic self, and there were spaces where I had to endure my whole entire life that I wasn't accepted, and I couldn't be my true quirky self, and I couldn't be the version of myself that loved me and showed up and just shared and shared and shared about the birds and shared about my passion. And my excitement had to be so small so that she could create space for others. And so when I did come back to birds, and it was after my finance career, and it was in the middle of me working at a market research firm, I recognized that with the birds, I could be me. Having the home within myself via language was beautiful, and it was so amazing. And I'm forever grateful that I took that leap and I did the scary thing and learning so many languages and challenging myself every time I come across a fear. Birds were the external version of that. it was easy for me to see it when I was sitting there and I was speaking Spanish and when I was speaking Italian. But when I'm back in the United States, it was harder for me to be like, you are so strong, you are so powerful, you're so capable, all of these things. And I found myself when I would first come back to birds, and I went to my first place that I went after making this big decision that I needed to return to birds. I went to Montrose Beach in Chicago, and I just did a loop around. It was the middle of winter. I finally convinced myself, it's my birthday, and I want to bring people that I love on this park with me, and I want to explore the birds with them. And we stop and we walk around, and my spark bird is a rock pigeon, and there's a greater story that goes farther back on that one. But in terms of the bird that I saw that day that changed things for me and brought me back to the birds, it was a black-capped chickadee. And I have a video of it to this day where it is just sitting on this line and it is chirping away. It's chickadeeing. And I looked at that bird and I was completely in awe, and I was stunned at the beauty, at the ease, at the vocality, at the grace that it felt like that bird existed within. I just stood there and I stared at it for way too long, but it was the perfect amount of time, and I would do it all over again. I stood there, I looked and I looked and I looked, and eventually all of those thoughts that I had about the vocality and about the beauty and about the grace, I recognized that actually if I sat there and I stared at myself for long enough, I would feel that about me too. And that was what changed it. That is what made everything so remarkably different for me, where I could stand up and I could look at myself in the mirror and I could tell myself, you are the version of the black-capped chickadee that you saw that day. You are the beauty that you see in others. You are the grace that you so desperately want to make sure that other people feel in your presence. And I found an externalized home that I could look at, and I could place myself within that context and tell myself that I was deserving and that I was kind and that I was caring and that I could feel that way and that I could feel that love externally and internally. Because as much as the bird is sitting there, and who knows what the birds are thinking, but if I was to personify that for just moment, I would imagine that they're sitting there and they're looking for their food, and they're doing the daily things that they need to do, like a little task list, like, okay, check, okay, check, okay, check. And they're going through their day as a bird would. And, I find often I get locked into my task list and I just check. Okay, done. But I don't take the time to pause and look at myself in the mirror and tell myself, do you recognize how awesome you are, how amazing you are, how graceful you are, how kind you are, how caring, how honest, how empathetic, how beautiful you are? And just like the bird, I don't recognize it. I don't pause, but I can be different, and I can show up different, and I can wake up every day and I can tell myself, you're beautiful and you're graceful and you care and you love. And I feel all of these things so deeply. And I am so grateful for this platform that allows me to feel those things deeply and embraces me for those feelings and for that kindness that will never leave me. And I mentioned this earlier, I've been a part of so many communities that have made me feel excluded. I was the weird kid. I was the kid that shifted around lunch tables because I couldn't find my people. And I honestly, until recently, I never did. And that was really hard, growing up so alone, but so surrounded by other people. And I look back now and I know how cool that little girl was. And if she just told herself it's okay to like the birds, it's okay to like this, it's okay to like that. Or if she had someone in her life, and it's not to say that like someone else could come in sweeping and saving me, because, other people aren't going to save us. And I learned that. But other people do show us, and other things like birds can show us just how much love we are deserving of. And that is something I've learned through birds. I've learned it through language. I've learned it through friends, and leaning into all of those things and leaning into the birds and allowing that black-capped chickadee to heal a piece of me that thought like I was too weird or too different, and I wasn't deserving of just sitting with and looking in the mirror and telling myself like, you don't even know. You have no idea. And you don't either. You have no idea just how cool you are and just how amazing you are and just how funny and graceful and kind you are. And being so lucky to just be in your presence. I appreciate you all, every single one of you. You've made an immense difference in my life. And this podcast episode was mostly about my story and my story in coming back to birds. My story isn't over, and I'm so grateful that it's continuing. And this is just part one of what the birds have done for me throughout my life. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to continue to share with you all and to show up on this platform and continue talking about how we can make spaces safe for other people who might be new, who might be scared, who might be unsure, who might be needing someone who can just show them, like that black-capped chickadee showed me, that everything was going to be okay and that it's okay to look at myself and love myself. And I'm still working on it. I see blue jays and I'm like, wow, to be that abrasive and to be that loud and to be that vocal and to be that, blue jays use that call to signal to other birds that there's danger in the area or that something is going on. And I like to think of myself in that same way. I think using my skills to be able to help others and to be able to refine and ensure that they are growing and learning, and I'm doing the same thing and holding myself accountable with love. I feel so grateful for you all, and I'm going to continue doing it. So expect a part 2 on this, because there's more to say about the birds and there's more to say about my story. So if you've got a bird story and how the birds have helped you, throw it in the comments. I want to hear it. Check out my link tree again, y'all. I also have Twitch and I have TikTok that I'm continuing to post updates. So I really, really am excited and I look forward to seeing you all there. I'll see you soon. Bye.